We are using 10 times more jet fuel on average than the average EU citizen. We really have to take some strong steps in aviation because we are such a huge aviation nation.
Welcome to Sustainability in the Air. I'm Dirk Singer, and this is our Signal series, conversation with founders who are building the next generation of climate tech solutions. Today, we're heading to Iceland, a country with an energy system unlike anywhere else, and a place that could play a surprisingly important role in the future of synthetic aviation fuels. My guest is Nanna co-founder and CEO of Idun H2. Her team is developing an e-kerosene project that could help decarbonize Icelandic aviation and potentially act as a green fuel bridge between North America and Europe. In this episode, we're going to talk about why Idun H2 pivoted from hydrogen export to SAF, the politics of wind energy in Iceland, the importance of book and claim, and what it really takes to get multi-stakeholder mega projects moving in a small country. Let's dive in.
Nanna, thank you for joining us today. Just to kick off, green hydrogen has often been seen as the Swiss Army knife of decarbonisation, especially in hard-to-abate sectors such as aviation. Now, the world has poured billions into green hydrogen, but the process has been quite slow. And recently, we've seen a lot of coverage about the green hydrogen bubble, so to speak, bursting. Do you think that Iceland, as where obviously you're based, a small country, abundant renewables, and a collaborative culture could actually be the place that could finally make green hydrogen work?
Yes, absolutely. That's what we're doing at Idun H2. That's precisely, at the center really of our business model. The fact that the sort of lowest hanging fruit, the most commercially viable sites for large scale hydrogen based projects. You find actually that just the absolute best circumstances to do a project like this in Iceland, and that's of course because of the power situation. We're a fairly large renewable, 100% renewable power system, but there's also despite our small size, there's a lot of capacity. There's already a huge amount of technical capacity here because we already have a very large industrial base. So we produce in Iceland here quite a bit of aluminum and quite a bit of silica. And, if these sectors weren't here and hadn't been established here and hadn't been operating here for the last, decades, then we would be in a completely different situation. But The fact of the matter is here in Iceland, even though it's a country of 350,000, it still is like a reasonable thing to start a 300 megawatt project. People are used to 300 megawatt projects. I think that we have. It's really all of our sort of strengths that we can sort of roll together. This technical capacity, the comparative advantage in the large scale, renewables, baseload renewables, and of course also just the sort of go get 'em attitude that Icelanders can often have. Nobody's sort of coming to save us, so we have to sort of roll up our sleeves and work with what we got. And we are actually in a really excellent position to really at least produce enough e-fuels to supply ourselves, and then long term maybe even export. But otherwise we wouldn't be at it. I just came to the realization 5 years ago that if it doesn't work here, I don't know where it's going to work, but it should be an excellent place.
Okay.
It should be an excellent place to do it. Yeah.
Awesome. I guess that leads us on to, sort of who you are and what Idun H2 is actually doing. So you co-founded the company, 5 years ago. It's now seen as one of Iceland's flagship clean fuel companies. For listeners who might not know, kind of give us the sort of the cliff notes about what it is that you do and what it is that you're building.
We are a developer.
Okay.
A developer of commercial scale hydrogen projects. Our first project is a 300 megawatt, about a 70,000 ton a year eSAF project that we are developing about a stone's throw away from Helguvík International Airport.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, that's the first project. So we have a portfolio of projects to come. But it is a big project, so that's really where our focus is. Right now.
Okay. I believe you described the company both as a developer and a system builder. What does that mean in practice?
Well, I hate to be repeating these sort of these old tropes that we hear about hydrogen, but the fact of the matter is these are not straightforward projects, right?
Right.
They are not straightforward. I'm a power person. I've been working in the power industry in Iceland for 20 years, and they are much more complex, right? So instead of 2 players, 3 players, stepping forward at the same time with some sort of new technology or some sort of new investment, or instead of 2 players stepping out of their comfort zone, you're asking about 6 players, essentially 7 players to step out of their comfort zone all at the same time. So a lot of the complications are in the fact that you are like delicately balancing 6, 5, 4 partners in these large projects where they're all bringing their different capacities and skill sets in. And I think that a lot of the difficulties are sort of in that aspect of the development. So that's what we're doing. We're sort of bringing in, the developer has to sort of bring in and choose and pick the correct partners, the right partners for the projects, the ones that are going to have the ambition and the interest and the motivation to stick it through. So that's essentially what we do. That's what we're doing most of the day is pulling together all these parties that have to be sort of on board in order for this large project to work. Which is it's a strange, it's kind of a strange type of job. I mean, it's really, really fun.
Yeah.
But it is incredibly, like, it's very, very diverse. And you have to allow yourself to really understand the perspective of the partner that you're working with. You have to allow yourself to understand what his timelines are, her timelines. What's motivating them, where their margins are, where their risks are, and that's I think that's really what has been part of one of the tricky things about getting these projects moving. It's just that human factor. You're making sure that you're holding people in, and you're keeping the companies, the needed partners in the project, and really managing the expectations and the timelines, and making sure that you're working with the company's strengths and understanding sort of where their pain points are. So it's really, really fun work, but it's kind of this is it's not as straightforward as the old power business that I come out of.
Yeah. Now you obviously mentioned that your first project will be located by the international airport, and obviously Iceland has a certain aviation heritage. With Icelandair being known as the bridge between Western Europe and North America, a lot of people still sort of fly from one to the other via Iceland. Obviously, Icelandair is well known for encouraging people to stop over. Do you think that that there's now a parallel there, that sort of Iceland not only as a flight hub, but potentially as a green fuel bridge connecting the two, I say two continents. Obviously, Iceland is in Europe, but the two, but the two areas.
Yes, I do. Wouldn't that be beautiful? Wouldn't that be a beautiful story for Iceland's tourism sector? Yeah, this is both an energy security issue. So Iceland, we're super green. Our power system, our heating, this is all green, but maybe not as fun for Icelanders to sort of think about. But we are using 10 times more jet fuel on average than the average EU citizen. We are using a huge amount of jet fuel in Iceland,
right?
And there is a real. It's incredibly important, I think, to make sure that we are not. We have to reduce the import dependence. That's the one thing. This is a even more important, I think, than in other sort of oil consuming sectors. We really have to make some strong steps in aviation, because we are such a huge aviation nation. We are, and so that's one thing. Just the energy security. I think that there's also just a huge amount of branding potential for Iceland, or a huge amount of branding potential for all of the entire Icelandic tourism sector, if they're able to really offer those lower emissions flight. And I think that it's incredibly important for us domestically, but also for those customers that people that are flying through and using Helguvík as a hub.
Yeah.
We know, maybe not you and me, Dirk, but we know that the younger generation, they are choosing flights based on emissions. So,
Absolutely.
we have a lot of young people that are traveling across the Atlantic, and I think that there's a strong segment of them that we can be grabbing if we're offering a greener path across the Atlantic with maybe a stopover on the renewable energy islands, a quick tour, and go to the Blue Lagoon. You can really see some of our energy related, really touristic sites. So I think that there's that aspect. I think that yes, just as far as good business for Iceland or good business for the airlines that service Iceland, it's also incredibly important for our energy security. But then the last point that I think that it's one of these points that I always have to explain to especially foreign investors that we're in discussions with, because we're currently fundraising, like all e-fuel projects are currently fundraising, but we are currently fundraising, and
of course.
yeah. But one of the things that I have to really sort of hammer home when I'm speaking to these investors is our facility is going to be in the flyover path of everyone that is leaving and landing in Iceland. So really, this facility it needs to look like something that we can be proud of. So I think that just because there's just a huge branding opportunity, what we could do with what we do with a roof, what we could do, because everyone will be able to fly over, and maybe we could put on the roof, you're flying with 100% green fuel from Eden, or whatever. But I think that there's also that branding opportunity that we can remind people while they're actually in air that they are flying on sustainable aviation fuel.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of opportunities there.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a very compelling story, sort of that Iceland is already known as a stopover point, between North America and Western Europe. And then if that were to, sort of go one stage further, and that those stopovers would be, that you could make them, sort of carbon neutral, would indeed be a very powerful story. Just a kind of a follow-on question from that. I mean, is your main objective I mean, obviously you'll be servicing the Icelandic aviation industry and sort of the international airport. Are you also looking at export opportunities for the fuel that you produce?
Not necessarily yet. We don't, one of the reasons when we started this, 4 years ago, and we knew that we wanted to develop a commercial scale project on this site. Initially, we weren't thinking about SAF. Initially, we were thinking about hydrogen export. Back in the good old days when people thought that maybe that would be, something that would be happening. I mean, I'm not saying that it won't, but I think we miscalculated. Essentially thinking that would be something that would be happening sooner. But in the back of our minds, knowing, of course, that SAF would be a possibility, and it was sort of I think it was like mid feasibility study when Element was doing our feasibility study. These guys out of Cambridge that did our initial feasibility study, I think we had them switch sort of mid through and add SAF in. We had them sort of switch, and so we switched like mid feasibility study, switched from just a pure hydrogen export project to a SAF project. And the reason why we ultimately decided to do the SAF is because the SAF is something that allows us to reach commercial scale, allows us to reach the type of scale that really allows us to bring the price down. All the while, there's enough offtake potential to offtake everything in Iceland. And the reason why we want to initially make sure that we're servicing the needs of all of the airlines that service Iceland is because most of the power, we have a huge power system for 350,000 people, but most of the power that we're going to be using this facility is new power, and it's new wind, and it's probably going to be a couple of parks, and it's not going to be easy for anyone developing wind in Iceland right now if they're only going to be selling the product for export. It's just in the air right now. There's just a lot of concern about us being able to meet our climate goals, us being able to, we're not doing the transit, we're not transitioning fast enough.
Right.
And it's just going to be a much, much tougher battle to get all of our power licensed and to really have the timeline. There's a timeline that you can work with in Iceland if you've got everybody up against you, and it's going to be a long timeline. Or you can choose to have a timeline. And I mean, you can choose, but you can work, you can conduct yourself, and you can work in a way that that the timeline can be conducive, and the timeline can work with our timeline, right? So we have to make sure that the wind is developed in time with the facility. And the fact of the matter is, if I'm going out and I'm asking for a new wind park, and probably a very beautiful area. That's just how most of Iceland is. I don't know if you've been here, but it's a beautiful place, and it's just going to be a much harder sell if the wind park is being built for some sort of export. That's just how it is right now. So this allows us to get that, to really make sure that we have the social license for the wind, and we're meeting Icelandic needs. This is not some sort of extra sector. This sector is incredibly important for our survival, for our sanity. We really need aviation in Iceland. So it's something that Icelanders, they want to decarbonize, and it's gonna make it much easier to get our power licensed and to get the social support that you need for a project this size in such a small country. So the plan is to try to offload everything in Iceland, but we're finding now though that it's going to be a little bit difficult. We do need that. I was very grateful to see that book and claim element in the STIP,
right?
Because initially we can start, because when we start production we could be fairly soon, we could be right up to 70,000 tons a year, and really in order to be able to match that production with buyers that are interested in e-SAF, well, I think that book and claim it's going to come in handy. It's going to come in handy for us. We have, for example, an MOU with Luxaviation, wonderful company, so incredibly motivated, ambitious about their green agenda. Just a real pleasure to work with. But this is a private airline. They're not a big user at any airport. So really, if we're going to help them, decarbonize, then we need to make sure that we have a book and claim system for them. So and others like that, of course, but just being able to match the motivated buyers with the first mover producers. So I think besides the book, it was a little aside. I do think that we will have to do some book and claim, but no, the majority of our production is for the Icelandic market. It's for the Icelandic tradition. It's for Icelandic decarbonization.
Absolutely.
But who knows down the road?
Yeah, and obviously, as you say, I mean, book and claim does give you potential, as you just mentioned with Luxaviation, to have agreements with, with purchasers who are, based outside Iceland, for example, in Western Europe or North America. So that is a sort of a powerful element. I'm just curious. I mean, you mentioned obviously that you decided to move to, sort of direct to eSAF instead of to hydrogen or ammonia. And last year at New York Climate Week, I spoke to the CTO of a large e-fuels company in the States. And I asked them straight. Obviously, one of the things everyone's talking about at the moment is the green premium. I'm sure you've seen the sort of the Gates notes from Bill Gates saying obviously we have to drive the green premium down, and and SAF has a fairly high green premium, and eSAF has the highest out of all the different flavors of SAF. And so I asked him. I said, what would it take for you to produce fuel that is cost competitive with Jet A? And he said to me quite simply, if you give me cheap green hydrogen, I will give you a product that is less cost competitive with Jet A. To what extent do you think that the advantage of being based in Iceland will help drive that green premium down? Do you think that you'll have a cost competitive advantage compared to power to liquid fuels produced in other areas of the world that will help drive that differential down?
There's a lot of questions in that question. Yes. So on the one hand, I do not think we are not in technology development. We're just using best available technology and choosing the right partners. We're not, we're not really planning to be using a huge amount of new technology. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of this is just steel and pipes, and a lot of this infrastructure cost is maybe not very movable. But we can and are producing a product that is absolutely one of the least expensive in Europe at this time. And that is because, mostly this is power price, right? You're folding that power price right into it. It's incredibly power intensive. You're folding that power price, and low power price, high utilization of your electrolyzers, of your production capacity. Those are your two most important things if you're trying to get your price down, your cost of production. So on the one hand, we are incredibly cost competitive with other comparable super low CI ESAF. We are not cost competitive with Jet A1.
Sure.
It is not our plan to be cost competitive with Jet A1.
Right.
We don't think that we need to be cost competitive with Jet A1. Our product has completely different attributes. It has different costs associated with it. It has cost reductions associated with it. It has branding potential. It has all kinds of other characteristics and attributes that make it not comparable to Jet A1. So, I get this a lot, especially here in Iceland. Well, you're never going to be competitive with Jet A1. I don't have to. I don't have to, because it's a different product. It's a better product. It's a sustainable product. It's a product that makes sense in the long term. And it's the cheapest way for them to reach real decarbonization. That's where we're cost competitive, just from the user's perspective. If I want real, genuine, fast carbonization for a low price, then we are absolutely your partner. That's so it's twofold, right?
Yeah.
But this competitive with Jet A1 thing, it's not important. There's other things too. There's other aspects too. Jet A1 is heavily subsidized. We never talk about that, but
of course,
70% of our jet fuel comes through Strait of Hormuz, and don't tell me that all comes from all that is priced by some completely market based. It isn't. The fuel it's already been subsidized, probably at multiple stages before it even gets here. Jet fuel isn't taxed. We can go on and on and on about this.
I agree.
But I'm not needing to be much cheap. No, this is a great. What we're offering now our customers is a really, really great price for a completely reliable fuel. And you sign up a contract with us now, and we're not changing the price for 15 years. This is that is also something that I think that airlines with a long view are gonna be appreciate. They're not used to it. They're not used to something being stable for 15 years. But that's something that we're going to offer them. So yeah, not cheapest, but a better product. So.
Certainly cost competitive. We've talked a lot about hydrogen. I'm just curious about the other side of the sort of the coin, because obviously, sort of power to liquid fuels, you also need captured CO2. And Iceland does have, everyone knows about Climeworks. It does have a sort of a direct capture industry and a sort of and a big CDR sector. Where are you getting the CO2 from for this?
Yeah, so not a lot grows here. I don't have a forestry industry that I can tap into, or a large agricultural industry. Right now, what we're doing is we are importing biochar. So we're importing RNFBO certified biochar from our wonderful friends at Hafner Energy in France. Yeah. And they are, a wonderful partner, really leaders in their field. And we have had a very fruitful relationship with them that is incredibly valuable to us. So what we're doing is we're importing biochar, quite a bit of biochar, and it's not necessarily, it's not really the most sort of sustainable carbon feed.
Right.
Obviously it's green, and we're going to have a really low CI, and people always and the shipping emissions are much lower than anyone would necessarily think. But we have to do that now, and then but I think that organically over the next over the project's lifetime, we'll continue to try to develop Icelandic carbon sources.
Sure.
So there is potentially with our we have a fish farming sector. There are some sectors that you can work with that are producing a lot of bio-waste that we will be able to extract some CO2 out of. But most of these are small. You have to always think about balancing that capex, balancing those investments with the amount of CO2 that's going to be extractable from that site. So, but this is really, I say the fun part, this is really our big challenge, accessing the power, getting the water, the selling the fuel, getting the best plot in the world, I think, for ESAF production. These were all our low hanging fruit. Carbon is really that's been the one that we've had to sort of deal with. All the projects have something. They all have something. Some of them can't get a fuel blending agreement. Some of them had a power agreement, and then they changed the rules, and now they can't get that power. everyone's got some problems to deal with, and I'm honestly kind of grateful that carbon is the one that we the one that we ended up with, because it's solvable. There's a lot of solutions, and we might end up having ultimately multiple carbon feeds, which is fine. I just think
Yeah.
that's probably going to be the future. That we're going to end up with some sort of living, breathing machine with multiple feeds in, and probably a few products that we're pulling out of it. So yeah, carbon is, that's really, you touched on the sensitive point there. That's really the one that is sort of the one that's going to pose us the most challenges long term. Mm-hmm.
So, previously you mentioned that you did feasibility work with Elemental Energy in Cambridge. I mean, can you just kind of talk us through that? What did it tell you about, cost, scalability, and also market time?
I just looked at it because it's been so long since we did it. Element Energy, they did an incredible job, and because I just looked at it again, and they just, because I was curious, I was just curious because we just reviewed all of our cost assessments, and we have a yeah, we just got some offers in, and we just did a whole review of our by the way, our costs are going down, which is a wonderful development. Hopefully that'll continue. But I was just looking at it out of curiosity, and the guys at Element 4 years ago, they could barely have been closer. They are just there. Everything has basically panned out that they put in the feasibility study, and it's just amazing because really, when they were doing this 4 years ago, there really wasn't. There wasn't a lot that had been done, but yeah, they were just incredibly accurate, both in their cost assessments and just the inputs just the general attributes of the project. So they did a great job. We did have to do another one just because the one that Element did was very, very good, and it certainly got us to the next stage that we needed to get to. But we ended up doing another one this spring, and that was done for the methanol to jet production process. So we had to sort of reopen. A lot of the stuff from the Element Energy feasibility study was used, but we also have new power contracts. A lot has changed in 4 years, so we had to redo our feasibility study. So we just had that completed this spring, and that was done by CRI, Carbon Recycling International, or of course an Icelandic company, and just an incredible technology company, and a real mature producer of e-methanol. They've been doing it for lots of years. And Honeywell UOP, the two of them collaborated on our methanol to jet feasibility study. So they built their work on what the guys at Element had done for us a few years ago. But it's really remarkable how how it held up.
I'm curious. I mean, obviously, sort of talking about e-methanol. I mean, aviation is one big market. Also, maritime is another market for that. Is that ever something you'd consider going into, or are you sort of 100% focused on aviation at the moment?
Well, we're using, we're in the production process. We produce hydrogen. Mm-hmm. We combine that hydrogen with CO2. That makes the methanol, and then the methanol to olefins process from Honeywell UOP, which we of course have not licensed yet, but it is feasible, has been confirmed feasible in our process. So methanol is going to be in there. The fact of the matter is that the buyers they're lining up for the SAF. We can always have, if we wanted to, sell a little bit of methanol, to try to get. I can sell some fishing ships, or we can sell ferries, or whatever. We could do that if it's sort of smaller scale. We are a large production facility, but in general, the margin and the subsidy, the support, it's on the SAF end. So probably, I think that most of the methanol will be directed into SAF production, but it's not set in stone. We can sell hydrogen out of the facility directly. We can sell oxygen out of the facility directly, and we can sell methanol out of the facility directly. All green. So lots of potential, and really, it's where we are. I don't know, what listeners have been to Iceland, but the aviation fuel is one thing. So half of our oil is aviation fuel, but mostly everything goes through this tiny little area the airport is. So I mean, it's probably 70% of fuel use in Iceland is just around that area, and it's not just because of the aviation fuel. It's also because all the people, they all get into buses. All
Mm.
of the rental cars,
Yep.
all of the fish. Fish isn't necessarily exported by ship anymore. It's
Mm.
all, fast freeze dried and brought by air. So there's
Mm.
already a huge amount of cargo, a huge amount of people. Everyone passes through that little spot right by our facility. So I think that once we're operational, we can really be a sort of very organic. We can provide a real sort of cost competitive way for smaller people, smaller operators in the
Right.
area, whether it's a bus operator, whatever it is, to sort of to take advantage of the fact that that the facility is there and has sort of been it's been financed essentially by aviation. So I think that it can be a real stepping stone. It can really just unlock the transition for this area.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, there's a huge amount of potential just for decarbonization, just in that area. So
Yeah, and
hopefully it's the first step.
absolutely, and in terms of maritime, and I was talking to another power to liquid fuel company 2 months ago, and I spoke to the CEO, and his prediction at the time was that maritime will be a bigger market than aviation, because at the time the assumption was that the IMO would agree stringent decarbonization rules, and that obviously has not happened, without getting too political, for reasons that we're aware of. So I wonder whether that still holds true. And as you say, whereas in aviation, certainly, in a European context, there are both incentives and there are mandates, and ICAO, has had a certain amount of movement, albeit a lot of people will say, not far enough. So yes, that is interesting. So I mean,
I just want to note though, the reason why. So number one, I think that just in general, airlines are a much more motivated buyer.
Right.
They're closer to the customer. This is more important to them. I think. And now, by the way, you become so sort of monofocused on one. I mean, I used to know much more about just the energy transition in general, but I've just been in this aviation world for 3 years now. So I was certainly am not an expert on maritime, but for us, we're sitting down with motivated buyers, and I get cold calls for SAF. We're
Right.
4 years away from production essentially, and I'm getting cold calls. So that's where the demand is. We know that those buyers are motivated. They can't necessarily sign the long contracts, but those are the motivated buyers. And so I'll certainly sit down with any of the shipping companies that want methanol. That's certainly something we would consider. But
Right.
I just think that if you want to move and if you want to work with people that want to move, that's the great thing about aviation. It's like everyone can make fast decisions and there's no waiting around. It's really different. It's a really sort of different culture than the power sector, where things are very slow moving.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think that we'd certainly. I mean, it's fine, but we are producing. This is a SAF project. This is a branded for aviation and really focused on aviation. So. Methanol, I think the methanol sales are, sure, it's a possibility.
absolutely.
We'll
So
see.
I mean, you just said, you just mentioned 4 years, and let's look ahead. So we're sitting here at the end of 2030. What do you have hoped to achieve, and what does success look like for you? So, like, where in an ideal world expect to be, sort of at the end of 2030 in 5 years' time?
Well, hopefully I'll be developing another project. Hopefully I'll be looking at our, incredible state-of-the-art, beautifully designed Pride of Iceland SAF facility. I mean, that's my ultimate dream, but I also don't necessarily want to stop. I'd like to have an operational facility. I do not want to run it. Everybody that knows me knows that I would not be a great operator, but I would hopefully have delivered this facility to a responsible operator and working on our next project. And whether that would be SAF or e-diesel or e-methanol, I don't know, but the dream is certainly to continue on and to find the next sort of low hanging fruit, the next projects that's ready to be commercially realized.
In an Icelandic context, I mean, you've talked a lot about, the advantages of Iceland. You've obviously decided to base yourself, sort of in Iceland. You've obviously, sort of had a career that spans, sort of multiple continents. I'm guessing from your accent, that you've had a lot of time that you've lived in North America. What would you tell an Icelandic founder today in climate tech? Why should they bet on Iceland rather than going to either Berlin or Boston?
I don't know if I would necessarily tell a young entrepreneur that. I think that, for us and for me, I can certainly speak of this from my perspective, but I couldn't do this in France. You hear that I'm raised in the U.S. I couldn't do this in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why I can do this and the reason why things like this can happen in Iceland is because I am able to pick up the phone and speak to the people that I need to speak to. And that is because this is a really close-knit community. And if you worked in this business for 20 years, like I have, and you act like a decent human being that can be trusted and relied upon, then we've been we've had a huge advantage in being able to reach out to people here in the sector, and the doors are always open. And we've been able to really capitalize on our existing relationships. But that's not for everyone in Iceland. I'm a grown woman, and I've been doing this for a long time. But for a young person, there's certainly great things about doing work here, and I think that yes, it is more accessible. You can access companies easier, probably, than maybe in bigger countries. But there are a lot of things that are more challenging, and one of them, and I think that we've been hearing a lot about this in this sort of North America European debate, but we are so aware of it here in Iceland. It's the lack of capital. So there's just really few equity investors. It's a really small market. Just the capital markets. It's very property focused. And if I was developing an app that would tell me what time I should be feeding my dog, I'd be financed. But
Right.
But in Iceland, yeah. First of all, you're already looking for a unicorn when you're trying to finance an industrial project like this, right? You're already looking for somebody that has a venture capital risk appetite and an infrastructure type of patience, right? So that's already a niche type of investor, and then to try to find that type of investor in Iceland is there's just really not a lot of them. Add to that, I'm a woman. I'm certainly not, I'm certainly not feeling sorry for myself. I'm pretty blessed to have been born a woman in 1978 in Iceland. I'm very grateful. But the fact of the matter is, it's just harder to fundraise as a woman. There's just something that happens. Do we know? I'm not sure if she can do it. There's just something that happens, even with the most well-intentioned investors that don't think that they're biased at all. So there's a lot of things that make growing a business like this challenging in Iceland. But accessing the inputs, getting the help you need, being met with a collaborative and positive attitude, those are things that are very, very prevalent in Iceland. And there is a very active entrepreneurial climate tech community in Iceland. I don't want to, but we all complain about the same thing, right? It's all we meet, and we know what is difficult, and that is finding the capital, market access. Those are the challenge. There are challenges from being such a small community, small country. But in general, I think that if you have something that can work, it's probably better. It's probably easier to get access to facilities and sort of the commercial contacts that you need.
Yeah,
financing difficult.
I mean, I guess that's a very important point that you raise. I mean, Iceland is known as a pioneer in being very, very progressive in terms of gender equality. And sort of, you mentioned being sort of a female founder, but of course, as you said, the investors who you're talking to are not based there. They'll be based largely in North America, and they'll be based, sometimes in Europe, and they will have, they will look at things through a different lens. So I think that's a very important point to make.
Yeah, don't give them too much credit, Dirk, because yes, in Iceland we are very, very. We have reached. I think we have reached gender parity as far as political power. We're doing very well as far as salary, all the social systems and everything are very conducive to females, but the proof is in the pudding. We know it from the numbers. Women do not get as much money for their startups and their companies here in Iceland. It is an absolute issue,
Right.
and it is subtle. That's why it's difficult to deal with, because I know these guys that I'm talking to, and they all love their moms, and they all think they're wonderful feminists, and they don't realize themselves that they maybe have a different set of expectations when a woman is talking. So this is measured. So I'm not making it up, but
Right, absolutely.
And I do want to give my country credit. I'm incredibly lucky. I mean, lots of incredible women around me, and yes, I know that it's easier here for women. I'm not complaining, but this is a real thing, and this is an area where gender parity has not been reached. And I think it's important to talk about it, because if it isn't talked about, then nobody sort of recognize that this is an issue. So, but it is an issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you know what my mother says? The problems are there for solving. So we're just gonna solve that problem too.
Absolutely, and that's very, very, very wise words from your mother. So listen, we're reaching sort of the end of the show. I just have one final question for you about Iceland, and not about the energy. What do you think is the best Icelandic innovation outside of the technology or energy sector? Like one thing that Iceland's brought to the world, outside of what we've been talking about. Could be anything at all.
Gosh, there are a lot of incredible companies. Of course, I know mostly the energy sector. You're a bit of a challenge. You know what? Kerosis, that was an incredible. We do have incredible tech companies. But we had a company last year that was purchased by an American company that produces. They use fish scales, fish skin.
Fish scales, okay.
To heal wounds.
Oh wow!
And this is working. It's an incredible product, Icelandic company. It was just purchased last year, or maybe 3 years ago. Gosh, by an American company. But that is a really good one. All of these sort of marine based and energy based. That's where the startups are.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first one that comes to mind. Of course, as soon as I hang up, I'm going to be like, why didn't I mention? But
no, I mean that is the first.
That is the first one that comes to mind. Kerosis, incredible company.
That is an incredible story, and we'll put a note about them in the show notes in case people want to find out a little bit more about what it is that they're doing. Nanna, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a fascinating conversation about Iceland, energy, and what it takes to really scale these projects. I've really enjoyed it.
My thanks to Nanna Baldvinsdottir for joining me. It's rare to hear such an honest and grounded perspective on what it actually takes to develop green fuel projects and why Iceland may end up with an outsized role in aviation's transition. If you've enjoyed this episode, you can find more conversations like this in our Signal series, stories from the people building real solutions in climate tech and sustainable aviation. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.